Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Fiona Sears, and I'm the Head of Examining at the Federal Office of AMEB. I am very happy to be here today to help launch the brand new AMEB Theory Grade 4 Integrated Course and Workbook. And with me today is the book's author, our very own theory specialist, Andrew Raiskums. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Fiona.
As most of you will know, we released our grades 1 to 3 theory books last year, and the call for grade 4 was loud and strong. So we listened to you, our customers, and set Andrew to the task of writing this new book. And it is a fantastic 120-page addition to the series. During this webinar launch, Andrew will give you an overview of the content of the book and will show you a few examples of the questions inside. You are welcome to ask a question in the chat and we will try to answer these at the end of the webinar. Have a look for the little speech bubble icon that's at the bottom of your screen. And my colleagues Leah, Jazz and Steve are behind the scenes and will answer as many questions as they can during the presentation, but Andrew and I will address them at the end as well. Like the previous workbooks, we will be making the content of the Grade 4 book available as an online course with videos and interactive content. These online courses also allow you to do practice online tests, so they are a fantastic companion to the book. The online courses will be available early next year. The hard copy books, however, are available now from the AMEB shop or your local retailer, and we'll put up some links in the chat so that you know where you can get them from. So to kick things off, Andrew, perhaps you could start by telling us how you first approached writing the Grade 4 book.
Well, I'd sketched out quite a bit of the book early in the year, January, February, but I will say that most of it was written during our first lockdown here in Melbourne. So I'll always remember that, we were at home and not supposed to be leaving the house. But that said, it was actually a joy to write this book because I was working from home and I could work in sustained bursts with very little interruption. So I guess that's always going to be the association for me, that the Grade 4 book was a product of our first lockdown here in Melbourne. But just looking at the book in general, I think most teachers would agree that there is a big jump from grade 3 to grade 4. There's more focus on the creative elements, and there's more history, more music history to learn in areas like the dances of the Baroque suite and things like the stringed instruments of the orchestra. So, just following on from grade 3, I've put that focus onto those areas. And I think, as we go through the book and, if we even just having a look at the contents of the book, we'll see that, that's where my focuses have been. So yeah, just looking at the contents, this is the order in which I introduce things, and as to be expected, the longer passages of harmony and the melody writing and the dances in the Baroque suite, these are the longest lessons, and where I go into the most detail about things.
And probably the areas that the teachers are going to be most interested in, I think, because it's, as you say, a step up to grade 4. So we do have a selection of slides just to show you all, to give you a bit of an overview of what's inside the book. So we'll just go through those now, and Andrew, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about each section of the book.
Yes, well, look, just starting at the beginning, obviously, we start with scales. The first chapter is all to do with the new major scales for the grade. The layout follows, from the previous books, and you can see I've used the piano keyboard. I think it's very useful for students to sort of imagine these scales on a piano keyboard. And in this slide here, I've shown that the scale of F sharp major on the piano is exactly the same as the scale of G flat major, and that they are enharmonic equivalents.
Great to be able to just visualize it like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's useful for all students, and not just for students who are playing the piano. And students who learn the the violin, for example, they might they might argue with me and say that F sharp major and G flat major are different scales, and I'd agree with them. But on the piano, they're the same. This next slide is obviously continuing the circle of fifths that we've developed in the previous grades. It's not complete, obviously, because we haven't yet learnt all of the scales in the circle of fifths, but it's up to this point in grade 4, it's complete. And so I think, again, it's very useful to have students thinking in terms of a cycle of fifths. And, you know, that each new sharp in the sharp scale goes up in perfect fifths, and each new flat in the flat scales goes down in perfect fifths. And, you know, it's all there in the diagram. I think it's a very useful diagram for students.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. So on to the new minor scales in lesson 2.
Yeah, this follows, again, the way I've been introducing minor scales previously. You know, they have with key signature and without key signature, and also just showing how they're all interconnected.
Great.
Yeah.
So lesson 3, double sharps and flats, diatonic and chromatic semitones.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say that this is, again, quite an involved chapter. I think when you get to grade 4, pretty much all the chapters are quite involved chapters, but there's a lot of theory to get through in this chapter. Yeah, look, there's more discussion about enharmonic equivalence between notes, introducing double sharps and double flats, explanation of why we have to use double sharps and double flats. So in this chapter, I actually introduced the scale of G sharp minor, which is not in the syllabus for grade 4, but I thought it would be very useful to introduce this scale to show the practical application of a double sharp, because that scale, of course, has a double sharp at the end. And I just wanted students to be thinking along those lines, you know, that we're using double sharps and double flats because of their functionality. And also it's just, you know, pointing the way forward. So that's one of the things that I cover in this chapter.
Okay, great. And here I think we've got an example of one of the questions that is at the end of lesson 3.
Yeah, look, one of my approaches in this book is to ask questions from musical examples. You know, I think it's, you know, you can hone in on specific things and ask short little questions, but I think by grade 4, it's very useful for students to be looking at actual music. And I think it's sort of more engaging for them anyway. So, you know, this first question on this page, I'm asking them to find diatonic and chromatic semitones in this particular melody. And, you know, I just think, you know, from my point of view, it's a good way to be engaging students at this level. Also, at the bottom of the page, I mean, you might not be able to see this, but there's a link at the bottom of the page to the solutions to all these questions. And as we've done in previous grades, we've made the solutions to every question in the book available online as a free download. And that actually includes the practice exam at the end of the book, which I'll get to later. So I believe these are just about ready, and will probably be available later in the week.
Yeah, perfect. So we can look forward to seeing those when they're ready. Moving on to lesson 4, intervals, and starting with intervals below the tonic.
Yeah, well, look, one of the most fascinating things to come out of this process was quite an energetic discussion between pedagogues about what the syllabus was actually asking for at this level for intervals. And so we perceived that there was some ambiguity in the way the wording was presented in the syllabus. So we've actually introduced a syllabus change as a result of all those discussions. And that is that we've just made it very clear that at this level, at grade 4 level, we're only expecting candidates to be working out intervals above and below the tonic. There was some ambiguity. I think some teachers felt that the syllabus was asking them to work out any interval, work out the interval between any note of the scale, but that is not intended for this level. So we've actually introduced that change to the syllabus, and that will be there in next year's manual of syllabus. So I'm hoping that teachers will will respond positively to that. So
Yeah,
yes,
great.
the first thing in this chapter is that I talk about writing intervals below the tonic and how you do it. And also there's more than one way to do it. So I've talked about 2 or 3 different ways of doing it. And then also the process of inverting intervals and also re-inverting intervals to work out what particular intervals are.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And I'm sure teachers will appreciate that extra clarity in the syllabus there with those intervals, Andrew. So that's great.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to lesson 5,
Yep.
modulation, which is a
Right.
big topic.
Yeah. Yeah. They're all big topics. Look, following on from the previous grades, I've used examples to show that modulations don't always occur in the same places. I think a lot of students expect, they'll expect a modulation at the end of the first line and then in the first 2 bars of the second line. But I've sort of put in examples to show that that's not always the case. I mean, it's often the case, but it's not always the case, and that students need to be quite vigilant and sort of be looking for accidentals and things like that will show modulations. Yeah, I thought that was important because the syllabus the syllabus says that students should be able to recognize modulations to the dominant or to the relative key. But in a melody, the modulation might not go back to the tonic. And I thought that was also important, that there are examples that finish in the new key rather than go back to the tonic key.
Okay.
So there's a couple of there's a couple of new concepts I've introduced into this lesson.
Brilliant. Sounds good. Okay, lesson 6, time and rhythm.
Yes. So as you might be able to see, I've started this lesson with a quotation from it's from Mozart's Symphony Number 25, the first theme from the first movement, which is a brilliant example of syncopation in music. And so what I do is I use that to lead forward. And there's also a couple of examples from Handel's Messiah in the next couple of pages that allow me to discuss the concept of hemiola, which is another new thing for grade 4. I also talk about stronger and weaker beats in the new time signatures that we're learning for grade 4, and how the knowledge of the stronger and weaker beats helps you to group the rests correctly. But I've also shown that in the next slide, actually it's the one after this, in 9/8 time, that using the grouping together of beats, the stronger and weaker, you can, for example, in 9/8 time, you can you can have a dotted minim rest on the first, covering the first 2 beats, but you can also have 2 dotted crotchet beats, as you can see on the screen. Both of those answers are correct. And in 12/8 time, you can also see that the dotted minim rest being used to cover 2 beats of rest, but also dotted crotchet rests are commonly used. So there's different ways of doing that correctly, and I go through that in this chapter.
Perfect. Okay, now here's the big one, 4-part writing, lesson number 7.
Yes. So 4-part writing, yes, obviously it's a big thing in grade 4, and I've broken it down into three different chapters. This one here, lesson 7, is the first one, where I talk about things like the chords you should be using. A lot of students seem to be confused sometimes about the chords they should be using at grade 4, and I'll often see examples where they've used chord 2 in minor keys, or they've used chord 7 or 7B at grade 4 level, and none of these chords are actually in the syllabus for grade 4. And I think, look, it's okay for students to use these chords if they're using them correctly, but if they're not using them correctly, then we're definitely going to mark them down. So I just reinforce the chords that students should be using at this level. And I also have a discussion about doubling, because doubling is one of those sort of things where people just cannot agree about what should and shouldn't be doubled. I'm sort of in the middle, and I just discuss a flexible approach to doubling. And I actually, in the later chapters, I actually show how this works in terms of voice leading.
Okay.
Yeah.
Flexibility sounds good. Okay, lesson 8, the 4 principal cadences.
Yes. So what we do here is we introduce the imperfect cadences and the interrupted cadence, um, making up the 4 principal cadences. I've included examples where the expected voice leading, so say in a 2 to 5 imperfect cadence, um, where the soprano falls instead of rises. And I've just sort of discussed approaches where you'll get those sorts of things that don't go with the expected patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So I've included those sorts of exceptions to show how you approach them.
Fantastic.
Yep. Okay. With the interrupted cadence, I show how the doubled third works in chord 6. So, you know, one voice should rise and one voice should fall to the doubled third. But I also show how this can lead to unisons, as in this page here, and just, you know, how you draw these on the stave. Yep. So lesson 9, yeah, this is a doozy. And I thought about this how I would do this chapter quite intensively. In the end, I decided that what we should do is that I should actually take a question and I should break it down in a number of steps, just to show students my approach to filling out these harmonies. So on this page here, obviously it's about knowing the phrasing. It's about knowing that cadences come at the ends of phrases. And then in the next slide, you'll be able to see that it's about knowing where the approach chords are before the cadences, what sort of chords we use for approach chords, that they are often first inversion chords, but they don't have to be first inversion chords. And then also the idea that the approach chords should lead by step into the cadence, but it doesn't always lead by step into the cadence. And I've been sure to provide variety in what I'm doing here, just to not be too didactic. Yeah, in the next slide, we've got here the next thing, which, oh no, sorry, go back, Fiona. Yep. It's about filling up the bass line. That's the next thing. So imagining harmonies for all of the melody notes, and yeah, completing the bass line. And then in the next slide, the approach is to fill out the harmony phrase by phrase. So if we could just go to the next slide. Yeah, so what we do here is I just, I fill out the harmony chord by chord, and I make comments and observations as we go along. So you can see there's the first phrase, there's the second phrase, and then in the next slide, you'll see the completed harmony. So
harmony, wonderful.
Yeah, so I've done that for a major key melody, and I've also done it for a minor key melody.
Okay.
And yeah, it's quite an involved chapter, but it needs to be. And yeah, there's just a lot of comments and a lot of guidance.
I think it's a great idea to just give that full example and to walk through it for teachers and for candidates, just to see how one teacher approaches it. But there's so much detail in there, and I think it'll be very useful for people.
I think at grade 4 level, students should be starting to see each of the 4 lines, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, as being melodies unto themselves. We're not actually doing a Sudoku. We're not filling out a crossword. We're actually making lines now. So there's the vertical as well as the horizontal aspect of the music. And I'm trying to lead students into an appreciation of this, and that they should be writing, you know, lovely harmonies, but they should also be writing melodies. Even the bass line, everything should be melodic.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to melody writing.
Right. So This follows on from grade 3. So what I do, I work through. I think there's 3, maybe 4 examples that I work through in this lesson, where I start with the couplet, and then we develop a basic rhythm from the couplet, as you can see at the bottom of the page. There's there's an assessment of the mood of the couplet, what time signature would be most appropriate for the text. And then in the next slide, there is we develop a more creative rhythm, using the resources of the grade, just trying to bring the text alive. Use the resources we've got at our disposal to just to enhance the text and give it character.
Fantastic.
And you can see that as we go through, writing melodies, look, everyone does it differently. What is a melody? There's all sorts of questions, but again, I'm trying to give you a variety of approaches, just based always going back to the text, working with the sense of the text, the rise and fall of the text, the climaxes in the text, that sort of thing, and just showing how you might do this. So at the bottom of the page here, there's a melody that I've developed from that basic rhythm, and it just, for me, it's a process in steps. You've got your basic rhythm, and then you develop it a bit further, and then you're trying to work out exactly how to shape it melodically, and then just write it out.
Fantastic. And again, I think it's really useful just to have that step-by-step process for teachers to go through with their students if they wish to. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so
Transposition.
the transposition chapter follows on from grade 3. There's no great shakes in this, apart from the use of accidentals in melodies, and also that melodies may contain sneaky modulations. Not that candidates are supposed to know that, but they may. But sometimes the transposition will, particularly into the keys with more sharps and more flats, will require the use of double sharps and double flats, and that's being tested in this chapter. So I've made sure that I've gone through plenty of examples to show how it all works.
Great. Now, this looks very text heavy. Obviously, we're not expecting everybody to read every word, but I think this one shows the depth that you've gone into in this chapter.
Well, look, when I started to write this chapter, I thought there's a lot of background that students need to know. And I think that, when students are preparing this material for an exam, I would like to think that they actually have perspective on this stuff, and they're not just learning it by rote and trying to get good marks by just learning things. So what I've done here is I've gone right in and just given a little music history lesson on dance forms, and then how they all come together in the Baroque suite. I discuss ornamentation, why it's there, how we execute these ornaments. Grade 4 students are expected to know about counterpoint as well. And I thought that's actually, there's a lot there. And I think that, we were in an exam, we would only expect, 2 or 3 sentences from them. But I thought it necessary to explain what counterpoint is, imitation, fugue, all this sort of thing. I've just briefly discussed these things, and it all sort of leads towards the dances in the Baroque suite, and just so students can get an appreciation of what counterpoint is, and how, for example, counterpoint is different to homophony, and just things like that.
Fantastic.
So I go through all the various dances, and discuss them in detail. I brought home all of the keyboard suites of Bach, and of Handel and Purcell, and I went through them all. And what's in the book is the result of all of my observations about these keyboard suites. Just on the previous screen, there was, at the top of the page, there's always been confusion about the courant, because the syllabus asks students to be familiar with the courant, but of course the courant, there is a French courant and an Italian courant. And I thought I would actually clarify this further, because in the partitas, Bach is more likely to write a corrente, which is the Italian courant, than a French courant. So I thought it needed its own little example, and we're actually going to make a syllabus change where students will be expected to know the French courant and the Italian courant, the courant and the corrente, as separate things,
Okay.
not just different versions of the same thing. And so that's what I've done here on this page. So the first example is an example of a corrente.
All right.
Yes, and so here, there's a gavotte, and then minuet and a jig. Another thing I'll just mention briefly is that the minuet and the gavotte exist as binary forms, but they also exist as compound ternary forms. That is, where there's minuet 1, minuet 2, and the da capo. And I've explained that in great detail in this chapter as well. How when we ask for minuet, it could be minuet 1, minuet 2, as well as just plain minuet.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And at the end of that chapter, you've got another example of a question where you various questions on an excerpt.
Yes. So yeah, this is what the questions look like in this chapter. It's an example from one of the keyboard suites, and then just a series of questions. I often get asked, what kinds of things would we expect to describe the character of a particular dance? And so for this is a jig here, and so I would say we're usually looking for three things. And for a jig, I would say if we're asking for character, we would expect short anacrusis or no anacrusis, lively and spirited in mood, use of imitative textures, those sorts of things. We're not looking for description of form, and we're not looking for description of time or tempo in character. Character is something else.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So that's the end of lesson 12. Lesson 13, stringed instruments.
Yes. Well, as you can see here, we've got a violin from the front and from the side, all the various parts of the instrument, the bow. I just wanted to go in and give a bit more detail than perhaps what students are accustomed to. And then in the next couple of slides, there's alto clef, tenor clef, descriptions of how the instruments are played, that sort of thing. And then the Italian terms that students are expected to know for grade 4 in this chapter rather than the final chapter. Just following on from what they've learned in this lesson. Yep, lesson 14, all of the signs, terms, and abbreviations that students are expected to know for this grade. All there. I've introduced a couple of changes. Tempo commodo. I don't know of a piece of music that has tempo commodo spelt with a double M. I've never seen one. So we've made another syllabus change here. Commodo in Italian is single M, not double M. So I've made a little change there. It's C-O-M-O-D-O, not double M-O-D-O. We've also changed the description of giocoso. So we've just fleshed this out a bit, just to sort of give students what I consider to be a better definition. So, giocoso is just cheerful and humorous.
Great.
Rather than what it was previously. Yep. The questions for this lesson, it's again relating back to a melody, how these terms, signs, and abbreviations would be applied in the melody, but also bringing in things from grade 4, like syncopation or ornaments, these sorts of things. Just bringing them all in and just sort of giving a sort of more holistic sort of approach.
Right. And then the final thing in the book is obviously the practice exam. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
An actual exam paper. So this is an actual exam paper that has come from our previous exams, and as I've said before, we've provided solutions to everything in that exam paper as well.
Yeah, great. We're getting near the end of the presentation now, but we just wanted to highlight the syllabus because, of course, Andrew, it's very important that teachers always refer back to the syllabus whenever they're preparing a candidate for an exam. So
Yeah,
the content of the exam is in the syllabus, is that right?
indeed.
Yeah. So that's your best place to start, and then you obviously the books will guide you through learning the content.
I'll just make a brief comment here and say,
Mhm.
if you're doing an exam in 2020, you must look at the syllabus for 2020 because things change from year to year.
Mhm.
And we've occasionally had problems with students saying, well, I was expecting this and I was expecting this. You must check the syllabus for the year you're doing the exam. That is very, very important.
Yeah, great. And as this last slide shows us, you can get the syllabus either in digital or hardback form. So our large manual of syllabus is now available. You can get that from the online shop. And I think some of the links will go into the chat now. And the digital, you can also get a digital version of the syllabus as well, which is great from the online shop. As we mentioned, those free solutions are available from our website. They will be available within a week's time, which is great for the grade 4. And I just wanted to let you all know that the next webinar, for those who might be interested, is the Lower Brass Technical Work and Orchestral Excerpts launch. And that's this time next week, Tuesday the 1st of December. So if you have any interest in that or you know people who might be, please let them know. And early next year, Andrew will be doing an online workshop, which will delve into grade 4 in a little bit more depth. So if you're interested in hearing Andrew speak further on this, you can tune into that one. So I'm just going to, I think we're going to take some questions now. So I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Yes, so I've just noticed a question here about couplets. Someone said, are they usually 4 bars long? I would say that it could be 4, it could be 8, usually no more than 8, but it really depends on what time signature you're using. If you're using 6/8, then it definitely wouldn't be more than 4. But if you're using 3/4, for example, for a slower rhythm, you'd be definitely using an 8. You'd be writing an 8-bar melody there. And then another question: would you base these on chords 1 4 5 1? That's one approach you can use. It's one approach you can use if you want to actually use a harmonic structure to write the melody. But that's just one of the approaches you can use. And in the book, I talk about different approaches you can use. And it's all about relating it back to the text. Where are the climax points? Where are the big moments of emphasis in the text? That sort of thing.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I can see that there's been a question. Somebody's asked, "Can you please go over again your interpretation of character?" And I
Yes.
wonder if it is quite such a big question. Maybe that's something that we'll schedule into the workshop for January. But do you want to say anything more about that now?
Well, I did say that in terms of character for the various dances in the Baroque suite, we're not looking for a description of form. So if you put binary form, that's not character. We're not looking for a description of time or tempo either. So if you say 4/4 time, moderate tempo, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for more detail, but as I've said, it's in the book. I've gone into a lot of detail about this in the book.
Great. And just a general question. Just the link between the AMEB Grade 4 book and the exam, how would you say that the two match up and what are the advantages of using this particular book?
Well, I would say that you know the way I think about these topics is actually how I've taught them in the past, and how I've sort of gotten results from students. And I find that with the creative aspects, students need a lot of guidance and they need a lot of time to understand what's going on. You have to sort of encourage your students just to spend time with these creative aspects. So that is reflected in the book. You know, the weighting in the book. You know, how much time I've spent on those creative aspects, and you know, how developed they become in grade 4. I think it's really important, and I would say that is what characterizes this book for me. It's the focus on actual music, and the focus on the creative aspects, and really nailing those creative aspects.
Great. I think there's one little question here. Is the tenor clef examinable in grade 4? This is in, yeah, that's right. Yes, is tenor clef examinable?
Yes, it is, because to understand the cello, I mean, you have to understand that the cello reads from treble clef, tenor clef, and bass clef, all 3 clefs. So the thing is, though, they would be asked to recognize a tenor clef, but we wouldn't ask any students to transcribe something from the tenor clef. You know, it would just, they just have to know what it looks like. They don't have to know how it works.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that might be all we have time for today. I'd like to just finish up with a few very important thank yous. Of course, as well as the author of this book, Andrew Raiskums, who we've just been hearing from, we would also like to thank the following people who've contributed to its creation. Our reviewers, Rita Cruz and Brett McKern, and also a big thank you to Rita for, again, writing the foreword that's in this book. Our head of publishing, Stephen Hodgson, for coordinating the whole project. Our typesetter, David Howell, who, as well as Andrew, has spent many hours with this publication. And our proofreaders, Alex Garsden, Kay Gilmore, and Christine Timoney, all playing very important roles there. Thank you also to the behind-the-scenes team today, Jeff Higgins, Leah Phillips, and Jaslyn Robertson, for making this online launch possible, to the AMEB CEO, Bernard De Pasquale, and all the other AMEB staff. And last but certainly not least, thank you to all of you for attending this launch today. We hope that you find great value in this grade 4 integrated course and workbook. As a thank you, we are happy to offer you all a 10% discount off the new grade 4 book. We will email you a code for the AMEB online shop in the next day or 2. So I think that's it. Andrew, have you got any final words you wanted to say?
Only to echo what you've just said. A lot of work has gone into producing this book, and it was an absolute joy to write it. And I hope that teachers and students enjoy working with it, enjoy using it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Okay, well, thanks, Andrew, and thanks everybody for listening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.